Namaste. I think there has been a growing recognition in the last few decades that with all the education, the equipments, the methods, the processes, techniques, good classrooms, good teachers, well paid teachers, very good textbooks, or so it seems, there is something crucial which is missing, and that crucial is unfortunately or fortunately not found in the textbooks. Because had it been found in the textbooks, we would have again reduced it to some small little narrow something. That something is to be found within us. And I remember a story from Sanat Sujatya where Narada, who has mastered some, if I remember right, 64 Vidyas, and yet he is not able to conquer himself. He is in a state of unhappiness, a kind of, not exactly depression, but as if something is missing in life. And so, in that state, while he is moving about, Rishi Sanat Kumar, he meets him and asks him, "What is the reason for your malady?" He says, "I have read so much, I have studied so much." He has all the degrees in his pocket or his jhola, but still there is something which is missing, something very crucial and critical. And then he smiles, the sage smiles, Rishi smiles and points out that, "Do you know something, knowing which all else can be known?" So he says, "No, there was nothing like that in terms of all the vidyas that I have studied." Now, he says, that is the vidya you must acquire now. That vidya, as we know in our ancient Shastras, is Brahma Vidya. It was given a primary importance at one point of time because it is the basis of everything else. When we talk about being moral, being good, being nice, nowadays, because of this lacuna, people are trying to bring in something, and that something is a very artificial, crude, and coarse substitute for the real thing, and we call it moral education. So, but moral education without a basis has no meaning. If this world has nothing divine within it, then why be good? If we are just a social animal, then why shouldn't we be like animal? It's quite natural that we'll have animal instincts. Only thing is we'll cover it with nice, neat masks. We'll do the same animal things, but speaking good English, chaste English, or whatever chaste language that we can. But obviously that makes it worse because it becomes hypocrisy and a kind of deceit. So, it's time that we rethink about the very basis of education. Why are we educating? What purpose are we going to serve? What is the goal of education? If it is just a question of getting a job, then yes, it's enough to develop certain skills. And based on that, human beings will earn a good livelihood. If it is about earning livelihood, then again, all that is needed is to, get a good degree. Doctors do it. Unfortunately, many other people, they have a good degree, they join good institutions, they get a lot of money. So that's it. Is that the goal? But just imagine if that is the goal we place before human beings, then what is it going to be the long-term effect of all this? Imagine a society which lives just for money and for a good job. What is called as the quality of life, which is unfortunately the quantity of life and not its quality, which is quite another thing. Then if society begins to follow that goal, then very soon it's going to hurtle towards the abyss. And none can save it, that's for sure. So, very timely and, 100 years before the malady would come so much to the surface, we are so fortunate that the Shri Aurobindo and the mother pointed the real problem and gave us the true solution. So, what really is the basis of education? There are two ways to look at education. Is that a child is like a tabula rasa, he is a blank, and we have to fill in things from outside. And by filling things from outside, the child will, grow and develop and, become a performance artist. He'll perform well, get good marks, get a degree, etc., etc. But there is another view of education which is more characteristically Indian, which Swami Vivekananda echoed so beautifully in the Parliament of World Religion, when he said that I am so proud to belong to a religion which believes that man essentially has a divine nature. I think it changes the entire perspective. So there is nothing to be imposed from outside. We inherit a divine nature not from our parental inheritance but from a divine inheritance. In other words, man as we know it has a double birth and a double inheritance. There is the physical body formed by the parents and the psychological being which develops as we go to school, as we interact in society, etc., etc. But we also have another inheritance which is our original inheritance. We belong to that Vansha of the divine. So this is our original inheritance, and that inheritance is the one which we have least focused upon. So once we understand this fundamental that there is within us the divine nature, then all that is necessary is to uncover it. So education changes from putting things from outside artificially manufactured virtue, artificially manufactured sense of do's and don'ts. And instead of that, to just help bring out this divine nature which is in everybody. Now we have the story of even the worst kind of people, where often teachers speak about, difficult children, this kind of children, that kind of children. But look how our stories have dealt with these issues. We have the story of Ratnakar, who held back within him a Valmiki, or Angulimal, who held back within him Anand. Then it just required a pointing out in that direction. Where was Valmiki? Valmiki was right inside Ratnakar. And a little reflection, a little thought revealed to him that, well, this is not what I need to be doing. I need to be doing something else. And it came out. So all education is, as the word in English stands for, educe, literally to bring out, and to put it at the noblest and the highest use. So what is within us, held back, is the divine nature. So once we understand a little bit about divine nature, then the rest becomes very logical, spontaneous, natural, organic. So this divine nature, if we go back to the Shrutis, is composed of four main aspects, though he is Ananta Guna. But when we look at the description of the Purusha, there are the four main aspects. One is knowledge, which as we are told is the head of the Purusha. And the second is power, which is, as we are told, which is the chest and the bhuja of the arms of the Purusha. And then third is this force of harmony and conscious interchange. And that is the udar and production and entire thing. And the thighs of the Purusha, and the power of dexterity in service, dexterity in everything, and that is the feet of the Purusha, because that's where we walk upon. So these are the four aspects of human nature, of which three are more or less recognized, and these three are, if you may use the word, knowledge, second is power, and third is the will, or the power, and the third is this harmony, love, and these aspects of human life. And there is a fourth aspect which waits in the background, and we'll speak about it as we go by. So first thing which is necessary is let's take knowledge. We all have some kind of a knowledge base or some kind of an intelligence. Intelligence is the base on which knowledge develops. But it is left to us what direction we give to this intelligence. Now when children are small, we may try to give them a direction of very pragmatic intelligence. We know nowadays that intelligence is one and universal, but it has multiple functions. It can take this as form, that form. It can take variety of forms. There's the beauty of intelligence. So we can turn it outwards and downwards. That's what ordinarily happens. And this intelligence becomes a pragmatic intelligence, utilitarian intelligence. It's meant for the needs of life. And because that's all that we focus upon, all other possibilities of intelligence remain inside. These possibilities are higher possibilities, not just about memory, which is what we focus upon, judgment, reasoning, still higher, intuition, inspiration. All these remain suppressed because it's not needed to perform in an examination, so to say. But instead, if we can turn this intelligence inward and upward, then this intelligence itself will awaken so much that we'll have a direct access to domains of knowledge. Now, this process of turning the intelligence inward and upward is what was called as brahmacharya. So, if you look at the four ashramas, the student time was a brahmacharya ashram. Brahmacharya is not just about about sexual energies, because children are too small when they start. But it's about learning to turn the energy inward and upward. It is a kind of continence and concentration, through which the energy, instead of being wasted and thrown out, is turned inward, held within, and turned upward. So there are plenty of processes which are described, but anything, when children go into its depth, when they learn to reflect, be it their everyday life, one of the best ways to, instead of the typical classroom teaching, which very often they mug up from a textbook, and they have all the answers without even having a question. So the right way is that children should raise questions about life, about everything that they experience. Then it's a natural and organic way, rather than give them artificially a textbook and suddenly you have Rutherford's and Niels Bohr theory of the atom, and they can't connect with an atom at all. There is no connection with the atomic universe, and yet they are learning it. But if we start with what is this table composed of and go deeper and deeper, then we'll not stop with the atom but go beyond. And there are many children in whom suddenly this intelligence will burst across a boundary, and new creative understanding of the very atoms and substance and objects will come out, because we have allowed this intelligence to break free from the human formula. So this is just in very brief, because I'm sure there are very eminent speakers who will speak about details subsequently. So the first thing that we need to awaken in a child is the love to learn. So that is how intelligence grows. Intelligence doesn't grow when it is given ready-made answers. It's like a fast food. So very often fast food teaching, where we have textbooks for everything, it stifles intelligence, because it doesn't even teach the children to raise questions. It rather tells them, look here, this is the question, this is the answer. So they are already standard answers. The child has not even understood the problem but has the answer, and he has remembered the answer. So this is the best way to kill intelligence. Whereas if we have awakened the love to learn, then the child will itself discover many things. And that's what is his contribution to life. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, when I read the story of Michael Faraday during my school days, I was very impressed that here was a boy who actually, his father was a blacksmith or something. And he was sitting in his shop, and he would, he would work with him and raise questions. Eventually discovered the electromagnetic wave. Now this is how the education should be. Whereas we read about it and forget about it. We don't realize it has far greater implications than just reading it in a textbooks, because it's the fundamental composition of matter. It is right there. And that's how the Sankhya discovered that there are forces and waves behind which can be discovered and which can be put to use. So let children learn to think for themselves, learn to reflect, learn to question, to the extent that Sri Aurobindo says that they must learn to question everything. This idea that children must obey whatever the elders say has been one of the biggest banes of today's time. The result is that they can't think for themselves. They're paralyzed. They're thought paralyzed. They're even afraid to think. Because the moment they think, the first thing that is instilled into them is that you are wrong, you cannot be right, because we are right. We are teachers, we are parents, we are books. When children learn to question, that's how Sri Aurobindo says that how can we regain this habit of thinking which we have lost. And he says, for a time, by reversing the process through which we had gained it. So what was the process through which it was gained? What did the rishis do? How did they know such things, wonderful things which have outlasted the entire, ups and downs and upheavals of time? Simply because they reflected. They stood and stared at the universe. And appalling though it seemed, they tried to understand what are the stars trying to tell us? What are the forces that weave the stars? And while standing on terra firma, on this ground, they could get at that forces because they knew how to truly reflect and to awaken this kind of intuition which comes when the mind enters a state of stillness. It questions, reflects, and after some time there is a state of pause, a stillness in which knowledge awakens, leaps up from within. This is a process which takes place even ordinarily in life. All true intelligence, all true knowledge is a aha phenomena. And if in a learning in a textbook, if the aha has not happened, then actually it is going to be forgotten, because it's really never understood. Real understanding comes when suddenly a point comes when we say, oh yes, and we are filled with wonder. Because it is a wonder how things operate. And if that wonder is lost, then we have missed something very crucial about life. It applies to everything. Take for instance in the field of biology, we have the genetic code. So nowadays everything is genes. But we don't know what really triggers the genes. Now genes are like switches. They are inbuilt mechanisms, we have inherited. But what triggers the switches? Are there counter switches? Now, when children begin to learn, think like that, then they will discover that we are not slaves of genes. Genes are nothing but, something which has got embedded or enmeshed in the course of evolution. And we are greater than those genetic framework. It is just a framework, but we can override the genetic framework. As we know that nowadays even Paralympics and many of these things come to show us. In Olympics, for instance, there is steadily an increase of if you really look at the old records, look at the cricket old records. I think yesterday I was just speaking of, sharing about Michael Holding, one of the very well-known pace bowlers, fearsome four. But now if you think about the pace bowlers, he's like, theek hai, it's okay. But there are so much more that is developed because human consciousness is advancing in every field. So this ability to go beyond limits, especially for the intelligence, is something very important. And how do they go beyond limits? When they are taught that the book is insufficient, when the teacher is insufficient, when the parents are insufficient. And who is going to tell them this? The teacher, the parent. And good books. Good books will always tell this. That's the beauty. Sri Aurobindo at the beginning of Synthesis of Yoga, he says something very interesting. He says, the sadhaka of this yoga must remember that he is not he says that the sadhaka can draw inspiration from, depending on his background, from the Gita or some other book or many books. But he must know that he is not a sadhaka of one book or many books. He is a sadhaka of the infinite. And then he reminds us of the Gita, Shabda Brahmati Vartate, go beyond the word, written or spoken. Now look at so beautifully these books have, one of the highest knowledge that is contained in them. And yet at the end we are being told, look here, even Shri Krishna at the end of all this, it's a good lesson to our parents today. At the end of such wonderful flow of the purest Ganges from the highest heavens, Shri Krishna tells Arjuna, say, look here, I told you what I had to say. You decide and choose for yourself. It's something remarkable. So children must learn to choose. And how will they learn to choose? If they don't learn to reflect, to learn to love to learn, this is what. And this love for learn can mean anything. Anything and everything. I can give a number of conversation, some child playing with pillow, and you just say, okay, what can you do with the pillow? You can learn the balancing act, you can learn the philosophy of life, how the pillow, when you press the pillow, compress and crush it, the pillow gives you comfort. What an amazing thing the pillow is. So many things you can learn, and how we can be soft and plastic. So if we are too rigid, we are of no use. If we are too rigid, you break. And if you are too soft, then anybody can crush you. But there is a right constituency wherein your softness is simply a resilience which bounces back. A pillow can teach us. So when we have the ability to learn, then every grain of sand can speak to us of the eternal and the infinite, provided we have this everything. Actually, I can give countless examples in everyday life, at least for me. So one of the things that I talk with children is, I tell them that, look here, tell me what 5 new things you learned. So that's enough. So children think of something outward. So I tell them that, look, outward is not the only thing. There are a lot of things we learn inside. If you observe our thoughts, our feelings. So children develop this capacity of self-observation. All these are fields of intelligence which our intelligence has not even entered into, let alone conquer. So when we learn to turn intelligence inward and upward, how do we turn inward? When it's the knower, his own field of nature becomes the field of study. It requires a certain degree of development. But if children can be made student of themselves, what does the Gita say? That, one of the great Devi qualities is Swadhyaya, which one way is, of course, study of the scriptures, but in its original sense, it means study of the self. Somebody who studies the self, and therefore, students, when they study themselves, they become their consciousness turned inwards. And then what are the possibilities of the self? Then the consciousness turns upwards. And in everything, memory, for example, to go beyond the limits, how to really expand the memory, how to increase the memory, how to increase concentration, how to expand concentration. Anything which breaks a barrier is, really speaking, bringing a new possibility in this world at one level. So this is about intelligence. And one could go on and on, but we have to take care of the time. The next aspect which is important is, of course, the very core of existence. Or even before that, we can say, before we come to the core, along with knowledge, we need power. One of the reasons why India fell is, Sri Aurobindo says, is there deficiency of knowledge? He says, no, we have enough jnana. We take from the beginning Shastra after Shastra. Sometimes it's too many debates, discussions, forums, platforms, all the discussions on Shastras. But power, then he says, what about bhakti? He says, we have enough bhakti. If you really look at India's thing, we see jnana, flood of jnana. Even in the most eclipsed period of India, we have jnana. Bhakti, even when there is dark ages, we have bhakti. But what is missing is power. And that's why India falls. Because even in Savitri, we see death says, all right, you have the knowledge. Where is the power? Do you have the power to conquer me? This aspect we missed completely. There was a time when we had the power. Imagine what power would have been there in a man like Bhishma. I can't imagine that, he takes a vow, and what a vow, that I'll never sit on the throne, never have a progeny, and with that power, he is blessed to decide when he's going to die. 1,000 arrows on his body cannot kill him. Because he has the power. He has the power to withdraw his consciousness completely from the physical body. Many of us, unfortunately, regard these things as just mythologies and never explore the possibility. He could withdraw the consciousness completely from the body and live in that state, that I'll choose when I have to leave, finally quit. So there are powers beyond powers which we have shunned. In fact, in yoga we are told, don't go after powers. There is a reason behind it, because power can topple the head, no doubt about it. But if there is the background of knowledge, that's why Sri Aurobindo says in our yoga, we arrive at the aim of the Tantra, but on the basis of Vedanta. When we are rooted in the one, when we understand that as these powers awaken, they have to be placed at the service of the divine like everything else, then there is no problem. And by power, it doesn't mean doing magic and miracles. That's not power. Power which acts naturally in the world and creates something. As I said, intelligence itself, breaking through boundaries and bringing out some new creative impulse. Look at, the other day somebody was saying that this is also a kind of power, Brahmatej, that, whether Sri Aurobindo is avatar or not. And I said, see, these discussions are not of much use. But one thing we know, that in the entire history of spiritual literature, after Vyas, and that too many people doubt whether all the works are related to Vyas or there is not a single figure, and correct me if I am wrong, spiritual literature I am speaking of. There are people who write all kinds of novels, Ibn Shafi, 100 novels, I am not speaking of that, James Bond. But not a single person who has produced this kind of a high quality, highest quality, 36 volumes, 500 pages each. What kind of power is it that was using his brain day and night? Is it ordinary? I mean, we don't need to discuss any further. Forget about New World coming or not coming, and all these things can be debated. But isn't it something fantastic? And not only that, what kind of power? I mean, before Sri Aurobindo, one could have, doubted that maybe these things which are described in our scriptures, is it really true or not? Ravana used to have all the Navagraha at his disposal, but now we understand. Mother speaks of even the ability to divert lightning. And there is a story when Sri Aurobindo is sitting in his room and there is a storm raging outside, and mother comes inside that, it's a cyclone, it's not a storm, so a lot of wind must be coming inside. Let me close the windows. And she goes and sees Sri Aurobindo is sitting quietly at his desk and writing pages after pages after pages. And the windows are open and not a drop of water is coming inside. Now that's power. Power is not something to dazzle us. That's not what is required. But a natural mastery over our own nature and as an extension over outer nature. That's power. When somebody had tried to harm him through occult means and he fell seriously ill on the verge of death, and then his wife comes and pleads to Sri Aurobindo, through the mother of course, that he is about to die. So Sri Aurobindo says, what? For a few stones? He had tried to throw stones in an occult way. And he recovers. That's power. Or when the cat dies because a scorpion is bit, and Sri Aurobindo just looks into the cat's eyes and the cat in 20 minutes wakes up stretches, jumps, and goes away. Thousands of people getting healed just by a look. Now, this is something which we have completely lost connection with. We are very happy speaking about Vedanta, God within, God above. But a God which has nothing to do with the world, he is there in some impersonal state, vast heaven of Nirgun Brahma, where he also doesn't know what's happening to the world. Or time to time you have to pray to him and he will intervene for some bhakta. But that God is within us. Where is that God within us who has been forgotten and lost? So that's where we have the aspect of power, but this also is something which has to be, children have to learn to cultivate it. One of the things it's coming through a back door is in a very mild way, For power, it's one of the greatest tapasyas of power. We have to learn how to hold energy, how to take it within. Otherwise, we are throwing away. When we concentrate anything, it becomes a power. Concentrate thought, it becomes a power. Concentrate emotions, it becomes a power. Concentrate will, it becomes a power. Now, basically, power is connected with our will. And what we have done for will is nothing but a second hand, third hand, or fifth hand substitute, which is called moral education. Put in a column, do this, don't do this. No gray areas in between. And children, one of the most boring lectures, I'm sure, I studied in a convent, was the moral lesson class. But the only thing we enjoyed was, this is very easy and for exams we'll have marks. This was a contact with moral education. It becomes even worse when moral education is reduced to something which is only outward, which is about how you are behaving, manners. Whereas inwardly one may be very coarse, very uncouth, and yet outward expression may be, that's nothing to do with true goodness. True awakening of will is about mastery. And to train and teach how to master oneself. Sometimes, master the urge for food, master the urge for... I remember something very interesting as a child. So, one of the things that one of the teachers used to do was, if you want to go to bathroom, you cannot ask. Now, this is something very strange. This is very strange. You can't go to washroom, you can't ask. But now when I look back, I realize that indirectly, teacher was very harsh, by the way. This is not a method. But had the teacher explained, now I understand that it's one kind of continence, it's one kind of control, it's one kind of mastery, but it never struck me like that. It looked like a very, very cruel and harsh thing, and it is harsh and cruel. But in every situation, if the child and whole life is a field for, many such situations where we can master, we can conquer. And if children can learn that self-mastery is something wonderful. A mother gives a little story about a boy used to get very angry, and once, he was like a bully and he got very angry and he comes to mother, I'm very angry, I want to hit this boy. He says, okay, fine. Tell me what is more difficult, to go and punch that boy or to hold your fist, keep it in the pocket and not take it out till your anger is gone. He says, mother, the second one is more difficult. So do you want to do an easy thing or a difficult thing? Now the child's pride. I want to do a more difficult thing. Okay, do it. And that is how she taught in very simple ways. Now when we do this, that's why people who are very violent are very weak. Actually, if this simple thing children can learn, that people who are very aggressive, very violent are basically very weak because they cannot contain power. And whereas those who are really strong are very calm. That's why Shiva is Ashutosh. But the moment he picks the trident, the whole world shakes. All the titans are running here and there. Shri Ram, such a Saumya image of Rama. Even when he is doing Talka Vad, he is feeling compassion. She's a lady, should I or should I not? And this same Rama, Lord Ram, when he stands before Ravana, and Ravana the 10-headed, Ravana the mighty armed, Ravana the indefeatable, Ravana the seemingly invincible, when he says all kinds of things, you're going to fight with me. Rama hears everything and says, now shall we fight, or you're going to just keep talking? Now this sense of power which we see found in our scriptures, I remember that Samvad with Parshuram. It's there, inbuilt in the fabric. We have not read it probably like that. As children, we used to hear these stories and enjoy it. But look at, again, Ram is very quiet when Lakshman and Parshuram are talking, till Parshuram challenges him to an actual fight. And Ram says, please don't do that, seer. Why? Are you afraid of me? No. We are not afraid of you. He clarifies, we are not afraid of you. Even if death challenges us, we'll fight and give it a very tough time. So please don't challenge us to fight. All else you can say, we'll bear. Now, this power that comes by bearing, by endurance, by the mastery of will over our nature, this is the essence of moral education, not an artificial do's and don'ts and good and bad. So this, the artificial stuff leads to another kind of problem, like be non-violent. Even if others are hitting at you, you just stand. This is not really cultivation of power. And sometimes this can be very dangerous because inside everything is boiling. But to master our nature, and then if there is a need, that's what is Arjuna, that's what is Bhishma, that's what our great ancestors were. Second is power. And the third, which is one of the most beautiful, without which life could not be, is love, harmony, and the joy of life. It's an irony and a tragedy that we know everything except how to love. I think I have several times spoken about it, the deficiency. Not only are we deficient in power, we are greatly deficient in this vitamin called love, vitamin L. And that's why there is so much of depression, so much of people often ask, what is the one cause? Because love is missing. Why is love missing? Because we are too selfish. We are so busy with ourselves, we don't have time for somebody else. And this time for somebody else should not be an artificial thing again. Look after your parents, not a mechanical, it should be a natural outflowing. It's not about only parents. If we teach that do to your parents, but ignore the plant, ignore the animal, ignore the neighbor, it doesn't work at all. Then that is an imposition, it's slavery, it's not love. Love awakens love. So this love is one of the mother describes one of the most difficult tapasyas. And yet love, harmony, joy, it releases the joy of life. Somebody doesn't have to love us to have joy. That's what we wait for. And it's so true. Love brings joy. But we have to learn to love someone to bring out the joy of life. Because we are always wanting. It leads to such a mess in our relationships, which is what is going to ultimately, one may have a very good job, but if one doesn't know how to love, then home life and every other life is going to be terrible. Because ultimately the fundamental thing which is going to give joy is missing. So to tap into unseen sources of love, and I can give only this example, which I often give. I said, do you think, now sometimes people, especially, I'm talking of the youngsters, adolescents who come and they're going through depression, because somebody has stopped loving or whatever has happened, turned away, 100 things can happen. So just ask them that, okay, that person has stopped loving. Have you also stopped loving? Oh, I don't want to see the face. Okay, fine. But have you stopped loving, I asked. Loving is not just one person. Have you stopped loving the tree? Have you stopped loving the plant? Have you stopped loving the animal? All these creatures love you. Even the stars love you. The river loves you. The rains love you. The mud loves you. All these are expressions of love. The fruit you are eating is because of the gift of love. The flower that you see smiling at you is a gift of love. Do you notice love is everywhere? Love is woven the stars when we look at night sky. All these are acts of love. Now this we can understand if we look at the entire creation with the eye of a conscious eye which looks at everything consciously. But if we say these are all mechanical things and I am the only conscious being on this planet, then we are heading toward disaster. Love speaks to us in many ways, and one of its most beautiful speech is when it is spoken silently. Look at the animals, how they express love. Look at the plants, how they express love. Sometimes just a gentle breeze will pass by. Look at just now that little rain which came in Pondicherry. Sorry, it's a webinar, I forgot. But in Pondicherry, it was getting very hot and humid. Suddenly we are blessed with the rain. So what is it? It's the love of sky pouring. Okay, children, get danced a little bit. There's such a joy in it. It releases instantly a joy. So this is how when we look at creation with the eye of love, with the heart of love, of course, it's understood that the ultimate satisfaction of this love, thirst for love, is only when it connects with the divine. But this divine is again not someone who is only disconnected with the world. Such a divine, even if we love, a divine who has disconnected himself from the whole world, how will he love? But it's also about the divine who is intimately connected with the world, who is in everything. And when we love everything, everybody, releases those energies of love. Love an idea, love the country, love this mud, and even the work that we do can be, we can love that. So releasing the energy of love, purifying it, refining it. Its crudest form is that I love myself. That's it. Then the second form is I will love you provided you love me. The third is I love you, but I want your love in return. The fourth is I love you. Okay, return is okay, but you must acknowledge it. You must say that, look here. And the fifth is just love as the plant loves, the tree loves, the winds love, as the sun loves, as the rivers love. Flow with that love. So there is this aspect which is completely missing. And all these three, if you look closely, relate to three different parts of our nature. Knowledge relates to the mind is a natural seeking for knowledge. Love relates to the heart, because heart is a natural need of love. And power relates to the will, because will is about mastery, about acquisition, about acquiring. And behind all this, there is something else which is the key to open the doors to infinite reservoirs of all of them. And that is the psychic being in us. Of course, the very nature of psychic is love. But at the same time, it can open the door. It is love which holds in itself the key to knowledge. It is love that holds within itself the key to power. How? Because from the psychic door, we can tap into the one divine who has everything within it. So this psychic impulse, which is the seed, the divine seed, we started with divine nature. So this is the seed of the divine nature buried inside. And this has to be brought out. Without bringing out this seed, all other things are artificial. To tell people, love your neighbor, love thyself, and whatever those 10 commandments is meaningless. Unless we give them the basis. The basis is here. We don't, without tapping it, we'll be always either critical of others, always complaining about something or the other. Because this is where love lies. We are not tapping it into the right place. So all other ways, artificially, it will not last long. And finally, there is something which is missing. We have mind, we have the heart, the will, behind it all the psychic entity. So all these beautiful divine qualities, divine nature must find a place now in our everyday life. It is hidden, covered by our darkened, ignorant human nature, as the image is in the Vedas. But when the divine nature comes to play, it is like beautiful cascade of flowers. It must be in a beautiful vase. Sometimes, when you have too many flowers and the vase is very small and fragile, try fitting them. See what happens. It just won't fit. And if you somehow try, some people do it tusdena, forcefully. Now what happens? You put it and the least gust, wind, and the vase breaks and it falls and it breaks. Or the water spills away and the flowers dry. So there must be a vase also, which is as beautiful, strong, supple, plastic, wide. And that vase is the human body. It is the basis on which all this play of divine nature will take place. An education which neglects the human body is no education at all. An education which neglects the soul is not even worthy of being called education. But these are the two poles which are the most neglected. We focus on the mind, some of the faculties, memory, not even judgment, which is so important in life. In fact, as children grow up now, there is a new thing. Some of these neo-liberal ideas, we should be very careful. They are very profound truths, but twisted. For example, be non-judgmental. Yes, of course, be non-judgmental. Who denies it? But in every moment of life, we have to judge one way or the other. I have to take a step. I cannot take a step unless I judge the consequence of my actions. So non-judgmental simply means don't condemn people because you know what they are. That's the meaning. It doesn't mean I'll do anything, I'll be asuric, I'll be the most demonic creature. The moment I say, look here, you need to stop. No, don't be judgmental about me. I'll drink, I'll, take a feme, ganja. Don't be judgmental. This is not what it means. It twists a great truth. The divine is non-judgmental in the sense that he doesn't condemn anyone. He helps everyone. But without judgment, life cannot be. Discernment is one of the first. Discriminating intellect is buddhi, one of the first powers that awakens in a mind which is awake. Because that's how life is. We have to navigate through life. So another such idea is unconditional love. Now, this is very good. Unconditional love, you should love me unconditionally. I'll put all the conditions before you. It doesn't work like that. I mean, unconditional love only the divine can do. Why? Because divine doesn't need anything from us. So, if a human being prematurely tries, these are very profound truths which one day humanity will experience and practice it. They are like the distant stars, but we don't leap into the distant star just because we can see it. There is a big difference between seeing and reaching out there. So you must know the difference that these impulses have started coming in humanity. So, mind itself, hardly we have explored it. The capacity even for memory, something which we teach children. They can't memorize beyond a paragraph. Look at the Vedic rishis. They transmitted an entire body of knowledge through memory. How was it possible? What was it, the secret of their memory? Visual memory, memory by hearing, tactile memory, memory of smell, memory of taste. So many kinds of memories are there, and memory can expand. There is no psychic memories, emotional memories, soul memory, how to bring it out. Memory of the body, it's a whole field, but obviously, paucity of time, I'll not go into all that. Just the mere mind. And then, education of the heart, completely missing. All that is, in fact, all that we are taught is, in competition, you must come first. Meaning thereby, it doesn't matter whoever comes second or third, elbow, edge out, but you must come first. So we are actually encouraging all that is contrary to the true spirit of love. Love is about togetherness. Love is about, binding together, carrying everybody together. And so when children grow up, they leave their parents behind. So parents say, why are you doing this to it? But Dad, you taught me. When did I taught you that you shouldn't take care of parents? No, you didn't say that, but you said coming first and being on top, that's important. Now, if you are with us, it's a big responsibility. I can't do well in my company. So I need to, I'm sorry, but I have to make a choice. The choice is between rising to the top of my company or in taking care of you. I choose that because that's what you taught me. It's not taught in so many words, but this is how the whole story goes. And then, of course, power we understand only external. How many politicians' name we have on a button? But the one person whom we can call the source of all power, the Almighty, and who needs only one number and no cell phone, and that is one. Call by any name. He is ready. So if you form a connect through meditation, prayer, aspiration, whatever way, to form a connect, that that kind of faith that if we call him, he is there with us. Leave aside developing these powers within, they do awaken through yoga. But that's a long process. But a basic self-mastery and this ability to tap into the infinite. So that is again what is, completely missing. And as I said, the body is the base. So sometimes geniuses are called that they are eccentric. That movie Beautiful Mind. Why? Because it's a truth. Because there is such an onrush of energies that only a genius can understand how the mind can break down under that pressure. It's not easy to bear the onrush of. That's why in the Vedas we see the gods, Ashwins, the Ribhus, they come and lay down the right. See what happens when we read Sri Aurobindo. After some time, half a sentence we are doing, then we close and say, very difficult, very difficult. It's not difficult. Our capacity is limited. So that's because the onrush of those energies we cannot bear. We may sit in meditation for 2 hours, but it changes nothing because out of that 2 hours, unfortunately, 1 hour, 50 minutes we are sleeping. Or slipping into sleep. Whereas to really sit for 2 hours in meditation, actively concentrated and receiving that power is near impossible unless the body and the brain are capable of receiving it. All education studies, when people ask why should we study this subject, that subject, it's to make the mind supple, to make it ready to receive. If the mind is not supple, some people have it inbuilt. Someone like Sri Ramakrishna, they are doubly, triply blessed special beings. But most people need to go through a formal education so that the mind becomes supple, able to look at a problem from many angles. When we look at a stone, to a physicist eye, it's a stone. To a psychic eye, it's God. To an emotional eye, oh, my loved one gave me. It's a priceless treasure. To the eye of will, what can I do? Can I lift a weight? This is how the same stone, to the sculpture's eyes, in every detail, can I chip it and make a murti out of it? So the same stone is seen from so many angles. This vision we have to awaken in human beings, not an age of exclusivity, where there is God elsewhere and there is this world elsewhere. And all these powers, and last but not the least, the beauty of the body and an eye for each and every detail, perfection in every sphere, this need for perfection. And perfection has nothing to do with only arranging objects this way and that way. Perfection of feelings. How can there be even a little bit of hatred? It's imperfection. How can there be anger? It's an imperfection. How can my inspiration become faulty? It's an imperfection. How can I slip out and speak untruth? It's an imperfection. So when we look at perfection from that all-roundedness, then we are laying the base for a divine superhumanity of the future. Whether we like it or not, it is destined to be, because it is our basic nature. Our true nature is divine. Education is only a means to bring it out. Unfortunately, very often we make it even more difficult for it to come out by putting children on the road of ambition, not realizing that if we teach them excellence and perfection, they will do well. Why won't they do well? But instead we bring in ambition rather than pursuit of excellence and perfection. So the whole thing should be developed integrally, developed for the joy of it, not because you're going to get marks, because life doesn't give marks. It only gives either a blow on the nose or then it gets swollen, or it carries us through the smooth lanes, sometimes through difficult lanes. So that's where the real test lies. Life doesn't bother about these other tests. But when we have achieved everything that we thought outwardly, then life says, are you ready for the real test? Oh, I have cleared all my tests. Okay, sure. And then we realize that we have lost something most precious. And that's when we fail. I have seen people at what degree of achievement and go into depression and commit suicide. That's not the kind of generation we want to create through education. But truly to bring out their divine nature and put it at the service of the divine in humanity. Namaste.
Thank you, Alabda, for the wonderful lecture. It's so enlightening and really liberating hearing you talk about the true aims of education in terms of knowledge, power, love, and perfection, the four powers of the divine Shakti or the divine mother. Uh, there are a few questions. Yeah, Manan Bindalji, you can go ahead and ask.
Namaste Alokda, this is Manan from the Delhi Ashram.
Hi, Namaste Manan.
So Alokda, I follow the Oruma YouTube channel very closely, and I pretty much watch all the videos, in particular on integral education. My question is specific to unlearning, Dada. See, the thing is that, my generation and the people who've already gone through some education and now are contributing to the country and to humanity. And definitely there is a shift in receptivity, and also there's an awareness that there's a lot of churn happening. And therefore there is some transformation which is around the corner. I think it's quite evident, and it's also visible to a lot of people. And in their own form and manner, people are talking about it. But Dada, yes, in terms of transformation and to kind of expedite conscious evolution and the march towards supramental transformation, what are your thoughts on those? Because we all have spaces like these, and people who are especially on the path of integral yoga should kind of carry the onus, not just in contemplation, but really in action. Because
yes,
like Sri Aurobindo yes, talks about Chit Shakti,
yes,
conscious will force in action. So I think marrying this re-looking education and unlearning along with force dedicated to the divine cause is, I think, the sweet spot that at least I am aspiring for. So I wanted to
I can share from a very personal perspective, because this was my issue while doing my medicine in my not schooling days, not during MBBS, because that time I was not aware. But one thing I felt during MBBS days is that whatever I am learning is not enough. And during the MD, it was very conscious that, this is not enough. So I think what is important is, instead of, I understand what you speak about unlearning, but that's way more difficult. We don't have to do that. The path of the Isha is expand, Isha Upanishad. So instead of unlearning, because after all, it has some truth. I'll give an example to make it clear. Not to be satisfied with any halfway home. to the urge for progress, and that itself leads to a relearning and reprogramming. I'll give an example. I think I gave passingly the example of genetics. Now, genes are important. They form a structural basis of the body, and to an extent, they can, influence our outer nature. There is no doubt about it. Now, this is learning. Now, instead of unlearning that they are not important, to say that there is something much greater which can very change, it can. So, to discover that area, it's like going into, if I have to use the modern term, cutting edge, not technology, but cutting edge knowledge base, which is transformative and which we can find embedded in consciousness. So, can consciousness, when awakened to its fullest, because consciousness is everywhere in everything, but can we, by expanding and awakening and heightening the consciousness, deepening it, can we influence matter and material process and physical process? I'm speaking only of the field of medicine. It applies everywhere. Can I, through an intuition, understand the illness of a patient better? Is it possible to reprogram my brain cells? Is it possible to reprogram my heart? Lay down all these things. Now, this is also a thought which has gone into the domain of medical field. And the same thing applies everywhere. So instead of unlearning will follow. Whatever is unnecessary will drop away. For instance, when we say genes are everything, it will drop away. It is a kind of unlearning. But genes do form a building block. And what is behind genes we'll discover. All discoveries have taken place like that. People have not called it by these terms, but there is that urge for progress. So I think what is important is never to be satisfied, as you rightly said, just by contemplation and speaking about things. But in whatever field, it could be the field of cinematics, anything for that matter. And in every area to know how I can do it better, not just better in terms of quantity, but better in terms of quality. Is there something new that I can bring out? So that's where, one of the prayers that mother gave to the children of the school, which is the basic prayer, and it is, make of us the hero warriors we aspire to become. May we fight successfully the battle of the future that is to be born against the past that seeks to endure, so that we may be ready to receive the new things and to manifest them. So there are new things which are wanting to manifest at every level, and to become receptive. So how do we become receptive and open? When we develop the humility that all that I know is really nothing, there is so much more. And to keep on moving till, as Sri Aurobindo puts in Savitri, where does knowledge really arrive at its culmination? Culmination is a way of saying, where God and world become true and one. So that's the point we must, dig and find. Doesn't matter, through science, through yoga, through any which way, the urge for progress. So not to be satisfied with anything. Unfortunately, one of the big banes of degree-oriented education, is that the moment a person gets a degree, there is this idea that now I know it, now I'm qualified. Often with some of my MD students in psychiatry, I would tell them that when they've completed their, MD, I would say, real knowledge begins now. Now you observe. You will have your own notings. You will discover wonderful things. So this urge for progress is what is needed. Rest will unfold. And if one is on the path of integral yoga, then the possibility is endless. Because this urge for progress becomes a conscious means. It changes it to an aspiration. And there is a help from above, from the grace. But even if one was not consciously open and simply had the urge for progress and towards greater and greater perfection, the help will come, because it's a new consciousness which wants to manifest new things. So that's how I look at it. And there are a lot of change.
I have one more follow-up question,
Yes,
which is kind of linked to it in at least my imagination, which is around contagion of consciousness.
Yes, wonderful.
And also, so I'm working with the VTs in the Delhi ashram, and what we have been doing for the last 15 days is meditate on the mother symbol and have discussions around it. And I'm keen on exploring contagion of consciousness in this context, and also what you just said previously, Dada. Thank you.
Absolutely. This is one thing which I can put it semi-humorously. Somebody came and told me, was shaking hand, and I stretched my hand to shake the hand, and the person said, no, I am having a contagious viral infection. So I said, okay, maybe my health is also contagious. So there's another kind of contagion we don't speak about. Unfortunately, this is a term we are using only for But if we take that there is a common ground of consciousness, see, this is the fundamental thing that we need to understand at the level of children. I mean, you understand, some of us understand, and that's why I say there are two gospels. One is a gospel which is based on division, like the particle theory. This is a particle, this is a particle. Other is which is like the wave theory. There is a continuum. So the first is actually avidya. Even if we teach everything, it is on the basis of separate. Physics is separate, chemistry is separate, biology is separate, geography is separate, history is separate. But another way is, which is vidya, oneness, where we discover that all these things, from the quasar to the distant galaxies, and man and the worm, they are all interconnected through a warp and woof of consciousness. So one of the fundamental necessities is to understand by various means that what really this consciousness is, and several examples. I mean, sometimes of people getting to know thoughts. Sometimes when we go to market, I use these examples in psychology, that see what happens with the company we keep. When we go to market, suddenly a desire catches us to buy something. The well-known idea of satsang. So there are very many examples that the kind of company we keep tends to affect us. So even in food, in every place, mother's food vis-a-vis a hotel's food, hundreds of examples we can give. That, there was this movie Ashoka where they saw that the moment you hold a sword, because it carries impressions. So these are very well-known aspects of knowledge which we have forgotten. There have been now a rediscovery of this through molecules of water, not molecules, the structures of water, where you see the structures of molecules, that they come together, crystallography. So they form crystals which can be seen by microscope, and how they respond to human thought, human feelings. But still we have not yet reached that point. Like we talk about organic farming, but we don't talk about the effect of thoughts and feelings and the consciousness of the person who is tilling the soil and sowing the seeds. So, but we're turning towards that. So to understand that it's one single reality which is taking many shapes and many forms. And if we can understand it, many problems of the world will be solved. That there is but one single reality which is taking many shapes and many forms, then life would be so wonderful. And the rest of it will evolve. It's a vast subject, but that's the way. Thirst for progress and perfection, and very importantly that it's a continuum. These look distinct and separate, which is okay for a certain purpose. And yet there is a undercurrent of interconnectedness. So that's the way one can understand contagion. Interconnectedness is something which we do understand now. And that's the way we can understand. Yes.
Thank you, Alok, for so lucidly explaining the idea of consciousness and the contagiousness of consciousness. I have one question. Today there is a rise of yoga throughout the world. People are coming into the path of yoga due to several reasons. And we also see that education is kind of it will be transformed because of the pandemic and because of AI and other things. But why there is a dichotomy between yoga and education? Why they are like, we are thinking of yoga in education, maybe one class, one period in 1 week in terms of that.
So it is the old illness which is continuing. Old malady which separates things into very distinct things. That's why, and sometimes we are carried away by the name. There are people, I am actually aware of it, and Mother has spoken about it, who are practicing yoga, they don't know they are doing yoga. Whereas there are people who are so-called practicing yoga, are in an ashram but far from yoga, because yoga is to unite God and world, and with man individual as the nodus in whom the union takes place. Man is nothing, but he is like a conduit in which God and world can unite. But instead, either we take yoga as okay for the body or to run away from the world. So naturally that yoga, or simply for some physical health. But yoga in its original sense is to bring God and the world together with man as the mediating agency. Which means in every subject there is yoga. In geography, I have seen geography and understood it completely from the yoga point of view. History I have understood from the yoga point of view, and I was talking this to some children, that how we can understand history. If we look at the graphs as the rise and fall of civilization and the common undercurrent, you can see history from the yoga point of view. without using the word. So it is a vision that one has to develop. It's the old, it's the old melody continuing in new forms. That's all. As Sri Aurobindo said, the old wine in a new bottle, but he wants the new wine. Doesn't matter whether it's the old bottle or the new bottle, but the wine should be new. So, but anyway, this is a beginning. It's enough that at least it's a good starting. Not enough, far from enough. It's a good starting that at least people are beginning to recognize there is something like yoga. Then, out of millions who recognize, maybe a couple of thousand will try to seek deeper. And out of couple of thousand, as the Gita says, few hundreds are there who will really try to go deeper, put it into practice, and become the catalyst for the change. These always will be few. But these few will be enough, as we just shared about Contagion, who will by Contagion allow this to spread into the world. I agree that all this talk about yoga right now is very, very superfluous. From one point of view, I would say almost puerile. But yet, a child starts with infancy, so it's okay. So, the infant will grow. At least the infant has begun to open the eyes and look at the world. He's delivered out of the womb. So, that's how I look at it. It's a long way to go, but humanity is walking that way.
Yeah, indeed, Alok. Unless we read Sri Aurobindo and understand that yoga is in the everyday activities of our life, we'll think of yoga in terms of some ascetic thing.
Absolutely,
And,
absolutely. Or some practice for just physical health or mind-body union, whatever it means.
And by that it will be divorced from our mainstream education.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we are past the time.
Yes. So
and as usual, but it has been an enthralling session, and thank you, Alok, for the wonderful lecture today.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It is always nice to hear you, and good that you begin all our modules and set the context for the...
It's a joy to share, that's all. And with such a wonderful, not audience, but actual practitioners. I would love to, sit and listen, but someday. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah. The chats are filled with gratitude and thank note to you, Alok. I can just say that.
Thank you.
Yeah.